2, 1. In the age of the internet, there has become a proliferation of unrealistic glamorization of startup culture that encourages every individual in the internet to start their own companies rather than a traditional career, because these companies that they have will have inherently better opportunities in the long run for them. But we oppose this premise, and we say that in our side it would be better that they would pursue a traditional career rather than go immediately into their own startups. So who is the demographic? Everyone in the surface of social media: teenagers, young entrepreneurs, young adults who just started in their careers. What does this look like? Young entrepreneurs influenced by social media to start a business of their own, influenced and incentivized to pour thousands of their own capital on a venture that has no guarantee for success. So how is this harmful in opposition side? Disillusionment of young entrepreneurs who just want to start their own business. They don't have realistic goals because of these disillusionments, such as with the drop shipping. These young influencers influences these thousands of people to invest in drop shipping, even though the process is actually harder than what it is portrayed to be in social media. And this leads to disillusionment, and most people tend to fail, not even making it past 1 year. And secondly, it's a waste of capital investment that they made using their life savings, and oftentimes they go bankrupt. In turn, to our side, makes it harder for them, in turn, it makes it harder for their side to rise up and quote unquote learn from their mistakes, because than someone who decided to start up their own business in a later date when they have a proper economical structure to support these ventures that they want to pursue. So we're not saying that it's bad to start a business of their own. No, we're saying this is good. But we are saying that the glamorization that now they would pursue startup companies instead of traditional business, traditional career paths initially in their career would be more beneficial in our side. So most people tend to have a bias because of what social media portrays. Elon Musk's family, people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, or Mark Zuckerberg, they think that these guys, they quit college and then they got filthy rich. They think that that's how the world works because of how glamorized it is. But no, that is not the case. Elon Musk's family has an emerald mine that in South Africa that creates a lot of profit. Bill Gates had access to computers before it even became a household name. Mark Zuckerberg was a prodigy in Harvard and already had established Facebook before he actually quit in his studies. So it harms, and furthermore, it harms the value of the market. Why? Everyone is doing the same thing without subscribing to a niche that could lead them to success. Because all the resources come from a single social media entity who caters to generalized information rather than actual specialized information that a mentor could provide, who can teach nuances of their business. We say that it's better in our side because in the sustainable career path that we want to propagate, we want to push for, ultimately creates a better ties and connections than these developed industries. So what does a successful startup possibly look like? It only looks like, for the 1%, it only looks good. In these instances, they make a profit, a substantial amount of profit. But the problem here is, in the words of the book of Psychology of Money, it is easy to make money, but it is hard to keep money. Even if the 1% of them succeed and make it big, the vast majority don't even make it past 5 years. They just go back to rock bottom, and now they actually they have no opportunity to go and rise up. So what does this actually look like in the common reality? Past the glamorized future that opposition will push, most startup companies barely even break even. Now GOB chooses to glamorize and forgo traditional careers, which are pivotal skills needed to create soft and hard skills that are made through hard work. And this glamorization would simply be unsustainable. So what does a failed startup look like? No profit made. They actually lose their initial investments and life savings as a consequence. Not only do they go back to square one, but they have no backup plans to choose because they forgo these traditional career paths. They now don't have a confidence in doing it again because they might fail again. Just like what happened with NFTs, everybody invested in this, and then now that they saw that it was actually not sustainable, they all quit because it's actually gonna make money. It's that kind of mentality that will ultimately push them back to rock bottom, not only with no opportunities to go back up, but they are actually now scared of failure. So the market inherently has a bias with those who have better opportunities, not even in a corruption aspect. It's just that inherently it's easier for them because they have more capital, more connections, and more safety nets. We're not saying a business is bad, but it's completely unreasonable to assume that these people who have forgo the safety net of an infrastructure of a traditional career can get as far as these kinds of people. You can say that it leads to better creativity, but no, 90% of people would not swap products even if it is more creative or marginally more effective. What they go for is the image of their company and simply that. Even if they go to, and simply that. So overall, we say that on our side, it would be simply more reasonable to go for a traditional career path and in the later years of their life, go for a business rather than continuing this perpetual state of glamorization of startup culture, which has very little infrastructure in actually propelling them to the careers that they want. With all of that and many more, government is proud to propose. One second.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the only way in which we can truly push the frontier of innovation and of the human race is if we believe we have the capacity to succeed. We recognize that this debate, I agree, is not about whether or not startups are good or whether or not the culture of this is good, but in reality, this is a regrets motion which is retrospective about the effects of the glamorization of startup culture in society. We see that this culture actually push people to be entrepreneurs rather than being stuck in a corporate rat race, which is merely an illusion of safety. It's an illusion of safety for the following reasons. A, the dispensable nature of a traditional corporate job given your capacity and chance to be laid off. We see this during the pandemic, and we saw the effects of that which affect society until today. This happens amidst inflationary environments wherein people who own businesses view their workers as beasts of burden who they can just lay off at mass scale just because the company now has to cut costs. B, on average, in a traditional career path, you are going to just be middle management with a decent pay, but it's unlikely for you to be able to reach your dreams or whatever you want in life. That is why people in status quo oftentimes have to do things like get part-time jobs like myself, moonlight multiple jobs, and work really hard in these multiple roles that actually have them only a chance at making ends meet. And we think that if these people committed all of their time and effort earlier on to do what they wanted, that actually sets them up for more success later on. And C is in terms of who actually makes money in the corporate world or in a traditional business chat. Ladies and gentlemen, it's merely the operator and the owner who actually wins the biggest and wins most often. Even if you are the hardest working person in the room, your capacity to earn is likely stifled. When you exchange your time for work or your time for pay, you have a capped maximum potential that manifests itself in hourly labor, meaning you only have 12, 15, 16 hours a day to earn a particular amount of money that is capped. Second, even if you have a monthly salary, that also is still capped. And third, even if you have commissions and bonuses, let's say you're in sales for incentives, on top of these things, they're also capped. So we're going to prove to you why it's actually better on our side. Warren Buffett told us that if you do not find a way to earn and make money while you sleep, you're gonna work till you're dead. And that's exactly what happens when you don't have this glamorized culture of doing it, because glamorization is good. This is not about the debate whether or not startup culture is good, or whether or not you should go corporate or be an entrepreneur. This is uniquely about the glamorization. Now, what exactly is glamorization, right? Three particular things. A, this is more likely than not something that pushes you to have a bigger upside as opposed to working in a corporate career. B, the narrative that this is actually super difficult but worthwhile at the end of the day. And C, this is worth the risk even if you fail. Because we do recognize and we take government side at their best that there are people who misrepresent these particular endeavors, and we think that even if this is a risk, we're willing to take it, which I'm going to explain further in my argumentation. Before that, a few rebuttals against the previous speaker. Firstly, he talked about how the internet and its proliferation portrays this as easy, and this creates a sense of disillusionment. My first level of response is that the glamorization of startup culture also has the proliferation of content that teach people how to do it quickly or how to do it step by step. That's why in a TikTok video, even if this is something of bite-sized content, you have influencers who actually have walkthroughs on how to do it, what to do, how do you pivot if these things fail. Secondly, even if to some extent there are misinformed material that portray it as better than it actually is, we think that in order for people to have a motivation to even get into these particular things in the first place is actually where you have true iteration. Meaning, the only reason we knew that the dropshipping model was to one extent flawed was precisely because of the glamorization. Wherein people tried it, they lost a few $100s and they realized, oh, it's not that simple. It's only through the glamorization of startup culture that you have a correcting mechanism wherein people can try things and fail fast, and as a consequence, iterate and innovate better, having the insights we have to succeed faster later on. Secondly, he talked about how, oh, it's only the 1% who succeed, these people who have a wider safety net. But we have to understand that these very people who succeed, who are rich, yes, they're an outlier, but they influence all of us, because them being an exemplar or them being an outlier rather than the rule is ironically what pushes us to go through the grind, even though we know we're never going to be as rich or as successful as these people. On average, we're going to be better off through that. Now, what have I told you so far? Because I've somewhat been rebutting in my, constructing in my rebuttal, right? We tell you that the glamorization of startup culture lowers the barriers of entry into business, and why even if you fail, glamorization provides better safety nets. This is because dreams are meant to be larger than life in order to incentivize people to actually go for it and motivate people who are on this difficult path to continue persisting. Which is why this whole survivorship bias thing or this whole fake it till you make it narrative is a legitimate and effective coping mechanism to help people get started in their journey or help people who are in the journey to persevere amidst difficulty. Ladies and gentlemen, startups and all these endeavors to be an entrepreneur are super difficult. You're probably gonna fail 80-90% of the time. But the point in which you do succeed, it becomes worth it. And we think the glamorization of it makes a better safety net in those 8 out of 9 times you fail, because at least you also have a community, at least you also have learning, and at least you also have insights to make better renditions moving forward. For all these reasons, we are very proud to oppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, we think that the problem with glamorization retrospectively speaks on its impact on traditional career paths. As an extension to my partner, I will explain later. But before that, a few rebuttals. Opposition said that external economic environment also impacts this safety net of illusion because you're at the risk of getting fired. But at the same time, we tell you that during these economic problems, entrepreneurs also face a larger problem of risk simply because you're not just getting fired, but you're also in debt and you lose a lot as a result of these economic conditions as a startup. Second point is that they also said that it's not really fulfilling. They say that there's better success found in pursuing these dreams and innovations, but we tell you that success can also still be found traditionally. This is because success can be found by working up the ladder in the sense that proving your competency and also finding nobility in your job and employment, but also being able to just provide stability for your family. So, what is my extension? My extension for this debate is that the glamorization is a shift from noble traditional professions. We know that culture forms beliefs. The thing that shapes culture is ideologies present in media. Glamorization suggests that startup culture is more valuable, traditional career paths aren't. Inherently, not only does it show the good things about startups, but it also points that it is good to possibly endure failure and risks when pursuing a startup. In other words, it forms this sense of virtue wherein endurance gets the reward. The problem also is that glamorization diminishes the nobility of traditional professions. It suggests that the hardships and rewards are better than the hardships and rewards of traditional careers. What then are the hardships and rewards of traditional career paths? The hardships probably includes doing something that may be stressful, the risk of unemployment, as mentioned, a toxic work culture, but at the same time, you get something fulfilling in the sense that you contribute to society, and not only do you have a stable income that supports your family, but it also means that you have a pretty normal and stable family life. Startup culture won't inform you about these hardships and rewards about traditional career paths, which will literally impact the beliefs of young individuals and breadwinners. Now, the impacts, looking back at it, the result of this belief has caused less financial stability among families. This is because during the pandemic, when people were mostly online, we saw a lot of young adults, breadwinners mostly, trying out these startup companies like dropshipping, for example, because of this culture. What happened then was that a lot of these startups failed because of the risks, worsening their financial situation, affecting their family situation, making it more strained because their family was losing money, they have no source of income of what to eat, and relatively, there was so much debt. Second is that people have become unwilling to come back to traditional career paths. This is because for the few that do become stable in the short term, this has made them less willing to go back to their traditional career paths. And this decrease in the number of working population severely impacts these different industries. Yes.
If you fail as an entrepreneur, you can always go back to corpo. But if you're comfortable in corpo, it's hard for you to get out of that comfort zone and become an entrepreneur.
Okay. Well,
I'm gonna have a call, guys, at like 4. Yeah.
okay. I won't answer that for now. But basically, second argument is that not everyone is prepared to face the risks, capacity. Everyone built different. Not a lot of people were ready for the farms of startup culture. In fact, it took a toll on the mental health of young adults looking to start their own startup companies. The failures of getting capital, not generating enough profit, losing money in the operations, and other things that they spent money on, such as online courses. A lot of people ended up being frustrated and depressed because of the risks. They would have liked for traditional career culture to remain, but clearly that's not what happened. Making people hope for something beyond their capacity is already a bad impact, especially when they fail. So for that, I end my speech.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing worse than regret. Nothing worse than not knowing your full capacity and potential, which can only be tested when you step outside your comfort zone. And we think that even if there is glamorization and hype, these actually create the incentive structures and safety nets that are going to be there for you to help set you up to succeed, but even be there for you even if you fail. And that can only happen in a world where we have this glorification and glamorization of the culture. Now, you might be wondering, why should it be glamorized? Why can't it just be normal, people choosing it? It's because if you don't glamorize it, you don't incentivize people to want to take that risk, which is why we look up to these very exemplars and visionaries like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Cuban, all of these super rich people, because those people could have chose to play it safe. But the very fact that they didn't play it safe and they succeeded and shows that is precisely what gives it value. But I know what their side is trying to say. They're saying, Joseph, survivorship bias. These people were the outlier and not the rule. But we think that on both sides of the house, startups and entrepreneurship are difficult, but the very fact that we have exemplars or outliers is precisely what reinforces those who are trying to continue trying, and the point in which they fail, they have the capacity to pivot. And these very exemplars who made it are the very people who can show them how to pivot, explain how to pivot, and that can only happen when you have the spirit and dream of the American dream and entrepreneurship, which we think is alive and well. Before that, a few responses against the previous speaker. Firstly, the previous speaker talked about how entrepreneurs face more risk than you getting fired. We tell you, A, from the get-go, that isn't necessarily be true, because we think the point in which businesses experienced hardship during the pandemic, they had the option to stop or to pivot their business model. We saw a lot of businesses stop shop during the pandemic, not because they necessarily lost all their money, but because they didn't deem it a viable business to continue going, meaning not everything you see shut down or stop is because of bankruptcy. But we think the unique capacity to be able to pivot can only happen best when you have this glamorization of entrepreneurship, because the point in which it isn't glamorized, you're probably gonna give up. And we think the worst case, or even if you give up, you can still go back to corporate, right? Sure, it might be a bit harder, you might have lesser of a pay, it might not be as big as when you were a businessman who was successful, but at least you have that. As opposed to the opposite, where on their side, people become so comfortable already earning what they're earning that they're less likely even later on in life to take the risks, even if they're already at the point in which they can actually do it. The second thing they talked about was how stable income is good, because if you are an entrepreneur, it might lead you to take on debts and have poor financial decisions. Yeah, but that merely is an illusion of comfort. We think a lot of these people who rely on their paycheck every month, we think is also a form of slavery, ladies and gentlemen. Corporate slavery, in which you subject yourself to the success and altruism of your company, of your boss. We are here to tell you that the glamorization of startup culture actually unlocks your capacity to be able to free from those particular shackles. Case in point, since the pandemic, people already have taken on roles like being a freelancer, being a hybrid worker, etc. And we think that those are similarly in a step towards being a master of your own fate and being an entrepreneur. What is my extension? My extension is talking to you about how glamorization creates the network and support system you need to become successful, and even if you fail, these things have a better safety net. Why? Let's take a look at the other stakeholders here. You have startup incubators like Kickstart, like Kubo in the Philippines, or even the larger ones in the US. You also have VC firms or venture capital firms that actually give funding to startups. You have distribution channels on media for people to be able to pitch their ideas, like Shark Tank and Dragon's Den. And like what the first speaker mentioned, the PM, you have content creators, people who are trying to proliferate how to be a businessman, how to do it in the fastest and most profitable way. The rise of all of these stakeholders would not be made possible in a world in which you didn't glorify this particular ideology, because glamorization creates hype. Hype creates virality, and virality creates the very trends that actually serve the desire of people to consume particular products and services. Meaning, before, content creation was not a thing. Before, being a freelancer or digital nomad in Bali was not a thing. These people were labeled as bums. But now, the definition has changed when all these people are now under the banner of being an entrepreneur, starting their own channel, starting their own vlog, starting their own small business, no matter how small that is. And uniquely, all of these capacities and chances can only happen when you actually glamorize this particular thing, when you tell people, it's worth it. Mahirap siya, but it's worth it. Or even if people believe the worst case that it's gonna be so easy, they need to have something to believe in order to have the chance in which to succeed. Because the counterfactual is, had you not glamorized this particular thing, they're less likely to be able to have that shot to get there. How do we then know that dropshipping as a business had so much room for improvement? How do we know that being an entrepreneur is indeed so difficult? It's because we initially thought that our capacity to succeed was actually what really taught us how we ultimately can understand that it really wasn't that easy, and the iterative nature of these startups is actually creates a better safety net at the point in which you fail, as opposed to living in an illusion of comfort with your salary, with your career path. So for all of these reasons, we're very proud to take it from opposition.
Starting a speech in 3, 2, 1. To summarize what both sides have said so far in this debate, I'll first be starting with government, moving up to opposition, and proceeding to weigh and impact afterwards. So, the case line of what our side has been saying is that it creates the sense of disillusionment in the sense that it paints the picture that it's not realistic and that it's not really good in the long term simply because of the different risks. And we also painted that we wanted people to pursue traditional career paths first to be stable before moving on to a startup position. We also said that it requires a lot of capacity to actually become successful in making a startup, no matter how big or small. Mentors, for example. And you also run the risk of losing a lot of money because, then again, it's not so stable. The further impact, I guess, is that to not make people hope beyond their capacity and not setting them up for failure, which is the bad kind of failure. What opposition have said so far are two things, is that it pushes people to innovate and it removes the illusion of safety nets. And also it incentivizes people to take risks, wherein they have these content creators that can tell you how to pivot. These businesses can stop their operations before they actually go bankrupt, and that comfort makes them less likely to take the risks. Now, on our side, we'd like to weigh it and say that the impacts is that comfort on our side is good because maybe you don't become rich, but you have good relationships in the sense that you don't necessarily live in this materialistic focused sense of life. Maybe your life is more focused around just having enough to get by, but more so being happy enough with the people that you actually surround yourself with. And by taking the risk, we assume that happiness is best found in succeeding businesses, but we think that the sense of fulfillment and happiness that opposition mentioned isn't necessarily exclusive on their side. We think that comfort in itself, getting the bare minimum, getting just enough to live by off your paycheck, can provide a sense of happiness because you have a family you can feed, you have friends you can talk to, and basically the mundane things are enough to get you by. So, for that reason,
It's public.
Yeah, me op and then op reply and then gov reply.
You first.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, fear is the biggest dream killer. No matter how much the previous side wants to tell you that comfort is good, we question the lens in which they actually view traditional employment. Because speaker throughout speaker, we actually told you from the onset that this in reality is not as safe as it was before, or is not as safe as they portray it to be. Your capacity and chance to be laid off, your inability to get a raise that actually matches inflation, and you being worked to the bone while the people on top, those who own it, or those who are the board of directors or the C-suite executives, are the ones who are making most of the money on your particular behalf. Like what my first speaker mentioned, on average, people are probably gonna end up mid. But we tell you that we also bite that characterization, and we tell you that not all startups are gonna be Fortune 500 companies. But if we were to make that comparison between a mid-worker and a mid-business owner, we rather choose to be a mid-business owner. Because when you glorify or glamorize the startup culture, you actually create a market for you to actually serve your good or product to. The point in which more people strive and want to be their own operators and their own business owners is when you also create a larger network and ecosystem of people who are gonna buy your shit, people who are gonna mentor you, people who are gonna help you and be there at the point in which you do succeed. But if you compare that to their side, if you get laid off or if you have a hard time in the corporate world, what are you gonna do? Talk to your boss? But bruh, your boss is exactly the problem. What are you gonna do? Talk to your colleague? Bruh, your colleague's in the same situation. So we think that uniquely, the glamorization of startup culture creates this particular ecosystem of people who are able to help you. It's not perfect, there's a chance you're going to fail, but at least you have your own time and your own capacity to take charge of your own life and say, I am a trailblazer, and even if I fail, it'll be on my own volition. It's gonna suck, it'll be painful, but hey, I can figure, I'm gonna figure things out. What exactly is the main issue in this debate? The main issue is traditional employment really that safe? And should we glorify or glamorize startup culture? And why does it have to be glamorized as opposed to just treating it normally? What did they tell us, right? The previous speaker told us about how comfort is good, you have to be able to take care of your own family, you might not be super duper rich, but at least you're gonna be safe. But we think that the point in which that you choose safety is a point in which you sell yourself short and don't give your family the fullest potential of what they might deserve. Because when you talk to old people, right, and you ask them, what exactly is your lesson for young people? And oftentimes, a lot of what they say boils down to regret, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that regret is more likely to happen on their side of the house when you don't have this chance to be able to try. We told you from the first speaker, we recognize that it's hard. In fact, even if there's misinformation that portrays it to be easy, that unironically might give people the false confidence they need to take that first step. Because sure, the point in which they fail because they thought it was easy is exactly the point in which there are people to be able to correct them and say, yo, drop shipping is kind of sketch, people misrepresent it, it's not as easy as you portray it to be. Here are 5 steps how you pivot your drop shipping model to something else. You only have those forms of content when you actually glamorize these particular things, when you create a market of people who are interested to watch it. What else do we tell you? 2 things, right? The first is, this is particularly important because it gives you the flexibility and control to do what you want with your own time. Because time is money, right? And we think that even if these debts and these harms and these things exist on their side, at least on our side of the house, you have a more complete locus of control of what you're gonna do with your time and money. Just like what the second speaker said, right? During the pandemic, it might be super difficult. You close shop, you pivot your business model. Is it gonna suck? Yes. But at least you have alternatives and you can stop the bleeding, as opposed to on their side when you say, boss, hindi, kailangan ko to pay for my bills. So maybe, can you lay me off a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now? You don't have that capacity to negotiate on their side. At least on our side, you have the flexibility to know when to stop. Now, their side might say, well, Joseph, this whole glamorization culture will tell you not to stop. You're gonna keep going and going and going, right? But the point in which you literally aren't earning, the point in which you're hungry, is the point in which you also won't be the Lulu. So even on our side, if people may be the Lulu, they'll be the Lulu to the extent that they feel hungry and can actually pivot and do other things. As opposed to on their side, when you're delulu about your own capacity, when you're delulu about your job, thinking that it's gonna be the best thing ever, it's the safest thing ever, you're gonna be able to afford all the things you like, is the point in which you are selling yourself short. Now to second this on this idea of a survivorship bias, that was an interesting point that they told us. But we tell you that the best way to deal with survivorship bias is exactly through glamorization. Why? 4 reasons. The first is, this actually allows you to create content to be able to know what are the top and biggest red flags and mistakes of a startup entrepreneur trying to do dropshipping. That content can only happen when you actually glamorize things, because otherwise people wouldn't watch it. The second thing is, even if you fail, you're actually more able to persevere amidst difficulty and not quit, as opposed to on their side, wherein when you do get laid off, you're more likely to go into the spiral of depression and anxiety because you don't know what to do with your life because you're hinged on your job. The third is the nature of iteration and being an exemplar, something that you uniquely get from previous speaker, right? The second speaker in our team, where he talked to you about how a lot of these things can only happen when you actually have the capacity to try, and more iterations happen on our side. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, is in terms of the exemplars, meaning yes, 1% do succeed, a lot of people are gonna fail, but what we get from that 1%, that 10% is invaluable. The people who blaze the trails for entrepreneurship, the visionaries who have the capacity to believe that tomorrow could be better, even if they put their life, their money, and their rep on the line, is the point in which all of us are able to benefit. So for all of these reasons, our side takes us today. Thanks. That was op whip. So I'm gonna speak again for op reply, 4 minutes. Then we'll do your 4-minute gov reply.
Oh, it's 4 minutes?
Yeah.
I thought it's short. Okay.
Cool. Hello again. Starting my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, there are a few reasons why side government cannot take this debate. The first is, in terms of their framing of traditional employment being so good and safe, we told you from the onset that the reality is both these decisions are risky. Heck, going to school, debating here, going to buy food, everything has a risk, ladies and gentlemen. But the biggest risk at the end of the day is not being able to try, not being able to live to your full extent and full capacity. And we think that even if you become safe in their side when you have monthly money coming in, how do you really then live a better life? Because their side also talked about having a family and stuff, right? And my previous partner also talked to you about how people working in corporate have to also moonlight, have to also get multiple jobs and work part-time and find multiple revenue streams. And that's proof that that paycheck you get is not worth it. And we think that the advent of the pandemic actually went to show how all of these things are legitimate, viable options. Like what the previous speaker said, before, it was either work corporate or take some risk and be a crazy like bomb, right? But now, you had the advent of being a digital nomad. You have the advent of being a freelancer. You have the advent of being a content creator. Guys, all of these things never existed before, and people would deem you crazy or a gambler when you try to do that and you don't go down the path that most people would go. But uniquely, what glamorization does is that it creates the capacity for you to forge your own trail. Yes, mahirap siya. Very difficult, very stressful. But like what my partners and I told you, This sets you up for success because you have more people to be able to talk to. We stand on the shoulders of giants. But even if you fail, it becomes somewhat more palatable. I'm not here to lie to you and say it's going to be fine, but at least you have people who are going to be able to help you pivot your business model, help you get funding, maybe even though you be an angel financier, etc., etc. The second reason why their side can't take this debate is in terms of level of responsiveness, right? We told you from the get-go the reason why we win the frame battle as to why both are sketchy, at least on our side. There's more opportunity and capacity for you to succeed, and the point in which you fail is the point in which you have a better safety net. But other than that, we think that a lot of the material I told you remains unresponded to, and even if they tell you right now from the last speaker, it's going to be too late. And lastly is in terms of, I guess, this intuition pump of where are people going to be better off? Because we understand that these things are very difficult. We understand that being an entrepreneur is so tough. The reason why not everyone is one, because not everyone can succeed in that same capacity. Which is why we understand it's not for everyone, but at least when you glamorize this particular path, you're able to show people the chance to succeed. And that's the reason why it has to be through glamorization as opposed to anything else. Because if you don't glamorize it, you have less capacity to innovate, you have less iteration, because people aren't gonna be able to take the risk. The only reason we had the exemplars that their side told you about was precisely because you glamorized it. Precisely because you told people that they had the chance to be able to change the world, they had the chance to be able to do what they want, and they had a chance to be able to actually live a larger life, better life, as opposed to being stuck in this rat race of monotony. So, for all of these reasons, we think glamorization is good, glamorization sets you up for success, and even if you fail, glamorization just creates a better safety net. Thanks, Upwin.
There we go. Thank you, sir. Speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this entire debate is a weighing between choosing a sustainable career path over a prospect of a startup company that will make you a lot of money in the long term. So, in the interactions of our debate, opposition stated that the pandemic created a precedent wherein it laid off thousands of people and they lost a lot of opportunities. But we say that this claim is value neutral and also very harmful in their side, because these startup companies also died during this time, and because of uncontrollable circumstances that both sides had inherently no control over. So we already said this before, there is an inherent survivability bias that 90% of these companies actually fail. And then they say that there's a cap that maximizes the potential of these people, and they say that it is better to start a startup that has no stability and that is full of volatility. So, they also said that it's often that not countered. Okay. So they also say that motivation is what they need in order to be propelled into success, but we say that that is not inherently true. Motivation doesn't constitute to success, and even if they also said that it is worth to fail 9 times out of 10 if there is a prospect that they will hit it big. But we say this that is very unlikely to happen. It creates a gambler's fallacy in their part, where they think that it is better to sacrifice these many times and fail just so that they have a opportunity for more. But we say that that is completely harmful in their side and wouldn't be sustainable. They say that these create safety nets, opportunities such as crowdfunding, Shark Tank, and content creators. But we say that that's all well and good, but but the time that it becomes overly crowded, these services ultimately become vices that make these support system fail. It's like what Syndrome said: if everybody had a superpower, then nobody is a hero. Nobody is a hero. So opposition also said that these jobs are unfulfilling, but my DPM already stated that that's not necessarily the case because they have their own families that will inherently give them this sense of fulfillment. But even if we buy this premise that they say, you sell yourself short and ultimately you want to take care of your family, we say that realistically this is not the case because that creates a precedent where it's a win or lose situation. The moment you win, sure, you can support your family, but the moment you lose, you go bankrupt and everybody is fucked. They're gone. Because you choose a very unviable, volatile system which is not realistic when you're also trying to support a family of your own. So we really frame this in a way that the benefits of traditional jobs wouldn't be mutually exclusive to upside. We want them to get their shit together first before going into a volatile market. That's why we say that we want them to start their own, to start with their traditional business, their traditional careers, build their soft skills, their hard skills, create connections in those markets, because ultimately that's the thing that will propel them into the future. And furthermore, it has financial benefits in their end, which opposition doesn't have because these markets are inherently volatile. That's what we said before. So weighing these two, our side is better because fuck you and your coping mechanisms. Even if you say that the survivability bias will ultimately support your side and ultimately motivate them to do better. But the moment they actually falter, the moment that they make mistakes, is ultimately the precedent that will cause them into a downturn, which will ultimately make them more unlikely to actually go back and make themselves rise up. And they also say a statement wherein it's easier for an entrepreneur to go back to the corporate market, but it's harder for a corporate worker to go into entrepreneurship. And that's all. Oh shit, it's actually 4 minutes now. With all that said, we're going to propose.